It's good to be here. It's good to be with fellow patriots. You know, I love history. I love it for its own sake, but I also love it because I think it's an important aspect of one's citizenship that he or she know their country's history. Amen. You know, Thomas Jefferson once said that a nation that expects its people to be ignorant of their country's history and of their form of free government, and also to be free, expect something that has never been and never will be. And with that in mind, I want to turn back the pages a little bit for you. You know, we're in kind of difficult times. I think we all know that. But you know, this country has been through times like these before. We've seen arrogant chief executives. We've seen an arrogant majority in Congress that not only tramples on citizens' rights, but stifles public opposition to anything that they do. And I want to recall for just a minute the administration of John Adams. You know, John Adams has become a little bit of a folk figure recently after the biography of him by David McCullough and then the film on television. But you know, John Adams was the leader of a party, the Federalist Party, over which he had very little personal control. That party answered mostly to Alexander Hamilton and his minions. And whereas Hamilton was a great soldier in the Revolution, and certainly a person of brilliant mind, he was a person who also had an insatiable appetite for political power. He was a strong advocate of an extraordinarily strong federal government, one that could consume the powers of the states. And he made no bones about it. In 1798, the Adams administration and the Federalist Congress enacted what were known as the Alien and Sedition Acts. Those acts were designed to stifle political opposition to the Federalist Party and to those in power, and gave to the president, believe this or not, and the president alone, the power to have persons arrested, detained, and deported. And worse than that, making criticism of the president and those in federal office a felony. Does that sound familiar? The last talk I gave on the Capitol steps back in April, Janet Napolitano had just declared that all of us gathered there were potential domestic terrorists, not unlike what the Adams administration had done and the Congress had done in 1798. Well, people were actually arrested, indicted for seditious libel, and tried in 1798. They were tried for simply speaking out against the President of the United States. Trials were conducted before federal judges, all of whom were Federalists. And folks, even Benjamin Franklin's grandson was arrested, indicted, and tried for publishing a newspaper in Philadelphia that criticized John Adams and his administration. But then, folks, something happened. And after hearing my old Kentucky home, I'm proud to say what happened here in Kentucky, and not only in Kentucky, but in Fayette County. In August 1798, a crowd of citizens, 6,000 strong, gathered at what is now Cheapside in downtown Lexington to protest the Alien and Sedition Acts. And those 6,000 citizens, heavens, that must have been the entire population of central Kentucky in 1798. Those 6,000 citizens heard the oratory of Colonel George Nicholas. Say, who is George Nicholas? Well, George Nicholas was the author of Kentucky's first Constitution in 1792. He was Kentucky's first Attorney General, and he was the first chairman of the Law Department of Transylvania University. He's the man for whom Nicholasville is named, and Nicholas County. George Nicholas was a lieutenant colonel in the Revolution, commander of the 11th Virginia Continental Line during the Revolution, came from Albemarle County. He and his brother Wilson Carey Nicholas were close friends of none other than Thomas Jefferson. But he migrated to Kentucky after the war and settled in Lexington. Nicholas lies buried in the old Episcopal burying ground on 3rd Street in Lexington. But what did he do on that hot August day in 1798? Well, he stood up at what is now Cheapside and called for Kentucky as a party to a compact known as the United States Constitution to declare the Alien and Sedition Acts null and void within the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Now, as a result of that raucous gathering here in Lexington in 1798, literally as a result of that gathering, no less a person than Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Virginia Declaration of Religious Liberty, the author of the Declaration of Independence, and interestingly, at that very time, the Vice President of the United States, elected because he got the second most votes in the presidential election of 1796. He sat down in Monticello and penned a resolution. He handed it to his friend Wilson Carey Nicholas, who in turn handed it to John Breckinridge, who was then living north of Lexington, Kentucky. And he told John Breckinridge, through Wilson Carey Nicholas, to take this resolution back to Kentucky and have it passed by both houses of the General Assembly, which is what John Breckinridge set out to do. He returned to Kentucky, a member of the House of Representatives, went to Frankfort. Then the legislature was meeting in an old 3-story stone building that was then only 4 years old. And he managed to get that resolution passed through both houses of the state legislature. And it was signed by Governor James Garrett in December 1798. That resolution, penned by Thomas Jefferson, called upon Kentucky as a party to the Constitution, a party to a compact known as the Constitution, to declare the offensive provisions of the Alien and Sedition Acts to be in excess of the specific powers given to Congress by the Constitution, and thus null and void within the Commonwealth of Kentucky.